Okay, this should be live now. I tried this a moment ago and I had some issues where it kept disconnecting. So fingers crossed, and hopefully that doesn't happen right now. I want to do a quick audio test and make sure there's no issues. So for people watching the recorded version, give me just a moment as I check the audio here and make sure there's no issues and you can hear me okay. So give me a moment. Hello, live people. Let's see. Yes, it is working. Excellent. Awesome. Video is good. Audio is good. Everything looks fantastic. So, hope everyone's doing well. Hope everybody had a good weekend. This is episode number 15 of Azren's Journal. For those of you who are watching this for the first time, this is a segment on my YouTube channel where I talk about my personal language learning journey. And of course, the segment where I give you guys a whole bunch of different language learning advice. Let's just dive right in here. So the biggest language learning topic I want to talk about today and start off with today is talking about if language learning gets easier over time or not. And I specifically want to talk about this because I find that there are a lot of people who are learning languages or another language, and they find it to be something that's quite challenging and they find it difficult. And it's something that overall they're like, it's really taxing my brain. And so I thought I'd share some of my perspective coming from someone who's learned, at this point, 5 different languages. So I think the simple answer to this question is yes, it does get a lot easier over time, especially because when we look at any skill, language learning, sports, like any skill whatsoever in life, building something, art, singing, anything. Every single skill, the more you practice it and the more experienced you get with that skill, the easier it becomes over time. So that the first day might have been really, really hard, but by the time you get to day 212, it's a heck of a lot easier, if that makes sense. And so for that reason, yeah, I think the simple answer for does it get easier to learn a language over time, yes, absolutely. I do want to say this, however, which is an important caveat, and an important little thing that we have to look at. Oftentimes, depending on the language, you might actually start to hit more complicated concepts over time with that language. So I can give you an example. For example, I speak French and Spanish, okay? So in the early phases of French and Spanish, the grammatical points that you're dealing with are reasonably simple. There's not anything, if English is your first language, the grammar points that you learn when you're studying French and Spanish are not that hard. It's reasonably similar enough to English where you can wrap your head around it and you can go, okay, that makes sense. It's not super hard. Yes, I think I can do that. I think that especially happens with Spanish because the Spanish pronunciation and the Spanish alphabet for a native English speaker, it's not incredibly difficult. It's not incredibly hard. Granted, there are some sounds that are difficult, but generally speaking, it is manageable. And so in the early phases, you might go, okay, this is hard or this is challenging, but I could figure this out. But what happens with Spanish and French over time is that you start to get into more complex grammatical points. And suddenly you're like, whoa, we don't have that grammar point in English. Or that grammar point doesn't exist. Or whoa, that's really different than how things work in English. Or often there's certain things that you read it and you're like, what the heck is going on? Like it just does not sync anymore. And so with languages such as, again, French and Spanish, as the examples we're using here, often things get grammatically more complex over time, which is why it may feel like often that it's a never-ending battle, quote unquote. Versus if you look at another language such as Mandarin, which is another language I'm learning, the learning curve is not really like that at all. As a matter of fact, Mandarin is completely different, where in the beginning it's really, really hard. The sounds are really foreign. There's tones, which does not really exist in English. There's like, the grammar is wildly different than anything that really exists in English, for example, or French, or many, many other languages. And so all of a sudden, Mandarin feels real, there's characters for crying out loud. Like, Mandarin is something that feels incredibly challenging up front. But here's the thing with Mandarin. The more you study Mandarin, eventually it actually starts to go downhill and it actually gets easier. Because once you have a certain knowledge of, once you know a certain number of characters, it's easier to learn more characters. Also, Mandarin grammar, it's not something that continues to get more and more and more and more and more complex over time, unlike other languages such as, like we said a million times, French or Spanish, right? Or even something like Gujarati, which is my mother tongue, or even English, for crying out loud. And so for a language like Mandarin, it's going to feel really hard in the beginning, but it's going to feel easier later on. So ultimately, like I was saying, the short answer, does it get easier to learn languages over time? Absolutely. The short answer is yes. Comma, there are certain nuances and there will be certain things that are different depending on whatever language or languages that you are trying to learn. Now, I want to switch gears a little bit and go on a slightly different topic, but it is related. And it's about the difficulty of learning multiple languages. A lot of people, especially if you're watching this video, there's a decent chance, there's a reasonable chance that you are someone who either A, is currently learning a couple of different languages, maybe 2 languages, 3 languages, whatever, or perhaps you're studying one language, but you would like to study more languages in the future. And so you will be someone who's going to study multiple languages over time. So for me, this is where things get really interesting. This for sure, without a shadow of a doubt, as you learn more languages, let's say you've learned, you speak your mother tongue, now you speak some Japanese, you speak some, whatever, I don't know, Korean, you speak some Spanish, you speak some whatever, right? Every additional language you try and learn will definitely feel easier, most likely. Especially because your brain's going to start getting used to learning languages and what that feels like and how to go about it. Not to mention you're going to see certain similarities between one language and another. So a good example of this would be when I first started learning Mandarin, I remember thinking that, the U sound, there's a sound which is U in Mandarin, is exactly the same as the U in French. Oh, I can do that. Lately, I've been realizing certain grammatical similarities between Mandarin and my mother tongue of Gujarati. And as a result, I'm able to understand those grammatical points in Mandarin a heck of a lot faster than someone who maybe had only spoken English prior to studying Mandarin. So for sure, if you're going to learn multiple languages, you will notice it getting easier with every additional language that you add on, with one minor exception. The minor exception being if the languages you are learning, if the additional languages you are learning have very little in common with languages you already speak, maybe you're not going to see you're not going to see a lot of things transfer over. So, for example, I can talk about my personal experience again. I first learned my first foreign language, aside from, I guess, English and Gujarati, because I grew up with them, was French, and my second foreign language was Spanish. And so what happened was when I was learning Spanish and French are both Romance languages, meaning there were a lot of things I could tie together from French and Spanish. So I could use my French to benefit me in Spanish. However, when I started learning Mandarin, it's so wildly different than anything else, any other language I speak, that yes, there are some similarities that tie over, but ultimately there's not all that many. And in many respects, while my brain was used to learning languages, which obviously helped me, I'm sure, while that was the case, I still felt like I didn't have a massive advantage over people who had never learned another language before. Again, maybe that's not true because I don't know what it would have felt like to study Mandarin having no language learning background. So maybe it would have been incredibly super duper hard, who knows? But that was kind of the feeling I had when I first started to learn. Now, again, switching gears a little bit, but staying on a similar vein of thought, or train of thought, not vein of thought. I don't know who says vein of thought, but anyway. On a similar train of thought here, often one of the questions I've been receiving is, at what point should you start learning another language? In other words, let's say you speak English and you've been learning, French for a certain period of time. You've been learning 2 languages, for a certain period, or one foreign language for a certain period of time. When does it make sense to add your second foreign language? When does that make sense? That's been a question, for some reason, a lot of people seem to be asking me this question lately, so I thought it makes sense to address it here in this video. As a general whole, the most blanket answer I could give that will usually be right for most of you is it makes sense to switch languages or study another language, add another foreign language, once you have approximately a B2 level, in other words, an upper intermediate level, in your first foreign language. In other words, when you are able to, basically when you feel comfortable enough in your first foreign language to be able to talk about most topics without too much challenge, you're able to watch videos and listen to things in the target language and understand the majority of what is happening. Once you've achieved that sort of level, that is when it tends to make sense for most people to switch over and now learn another language or start learning another foreign language. Also, if you're lucky, what you can try is you can try a strategy which, if I'm not mistaken, is called laddering. I think that's what it's called, like a ladder. What you climb up, you climb a ladder, like laddering, I think it's called, which basically means you use your more fluent foreign language to learn another foreign language. So let's give an example here. Let's say you speak French as your mother tongue. You have an upper intermediate level in English, and now you want to learn Spanish, okay? If you're going to ladder to learn Spanish, you would take Spanish lessons, but you would take them in English. So your teacher would teach you Spanish using English. In other words, your teacher would use your L2 for you to learn an L3. So they'd use your second language for you to learn a third language. If you're lucky, depending on what your languages you're learning, that might be something that you're able to use, and then you're going to get two birds with one stone. You're going to be able to obviously learn, improve your second language, but you're also going to learn a third language. By the way, SuperDuper Random, a friend of mine pointed this out once. Isn't that a terrible expression? Kill one bird with two stones? Like, that wouldn't, like, my friend said this, and so I can't take benefit for this joke, I can't take credit for this joke. My friend made a joke, he's like, if you replace that saying with any other animal, it doesn't work. Like, I can't say, oh, you know, 2 dogs, 1 car, kill 2 dogs with 1 car. Everyone would say, like, what? Kill 2 dogs with 1 car? That's ridiculous. Like, it sounds so morbid and gross. But for some reason in English, when we say kill 2 birds with 1 stone, it's like an expression that is reasonably common, and people don't even think twice about it. What a strange concept with language. And that actually, funnily enough, brings me to maybe, let's say, the final language learning point for today, which has to do with what is considered to be polite or acceptable in one language compared to another language. Because the reality is this, like, although saying something in your mother tongue, although that might be acceptable, you can say that exact same thing in another language and it has a wildly different meaning or a wildly different connotation. So a great example of this would be, for example, what's a good one? Here's one. In Mandarin, it is not necessarily a bad thing to say that someone has gained weight. Not necessarily. You could say, oh, you've gained some weight. And that is not necessarily, depending on your tone of voice, context, etc., it's not necessarily a bad thing. But in English, to say someone has gained weight, I mean, 99% of the time, that is a mean or a negative thing to say. The only exception I could think of is maybe if you knew that person is really trying to gain weight because they were severely underweight or they were anorexic or there was some other situation going on, maybe then it could be positive or viewed in a good way. But generally speaking, if I say, oh wow, hey, Sam, it's been such a long time since I've seen you. What's new? Wow, you've gotten fat or you've gained weight. Like, it'd be like, what? What are you talking about? So it's important, right? When you're learning other languages, it's important. I talked about this on my podcast earlier today. It's important to have as one of your primary focuses to sound as natural as you can with that language. And when I say sound as natural as you can, I mean that in all different connotations. I mean pronunciation and accent. I mean the types of vocabulary you use. I mean the types of expressions you use based on different contexts. I mean focusing on the right grammar. I mean, that's a very all-encompassing kind of statement, and that should be, in my perspective, and I might change this in the future, I might change my mind on this, but where I stand today and where my mind goes as of today on February, 11th today, I believe it is? February 11th on this Monday afternoon, 2019, my brain thinks, I really believe that sounding as natural as possible as your North Star, I feel that can be a really good idea, and that can benefit a lot of language learners out there. I'm going to take a pause here and ask people, if you've liked the video so far, please hit the like button. If you've disliked it, then by all means, hit the dislike button. That's fine. That'll give me the feedback. Anyone watching the recording, love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Be very, very curious to hear them. And let's wrap this video up with a couple of personal updates. So first and foremost, a slightly annoying thing is about my laptop. So again, for those of you who don't know, my laptop was stolen. It would have been, I think, 2 and a bit weeks ago, two and a half, 2 weeks ago, something like that. It was stolen along with my backpack and a lot of other things inside. I have purchased a new laptop. I purchased it online. I was told that it was going to arrive last week, like the end of last week. But when I actually checked the confirmation email, at the bottom it says that it's supposed to arrive at the end of February. And I was like, oh, shoot. So it's slightly annoying. I thought I would have a laptop sooner than turns out I probably will have a laptop. So slightly annoying there. Second update, I clearly need to shave. Check this out, a lot of shaving. You can't see this side of my face, but you can see this side. Clearly some shaving needs to happen here. Lately in Calgary, and this is a fun one to share, especially for people who live in a warm country. It's been freezing in Calgary. So cold in Calgary lately. Like, it's been a deep freeze. We've not had a break from the cold weather. It's been minus 30 or colder every single day, which is just nuts and has not been fun. Today, I think it's like minus 20. And literally, I was walking outside thinking, oh, it's actually not too cold. And I was like, oh my God, I'm thinking minus 20 is not too cold. Like, you live in a cold country when. But again, the good news is we're in February. So hopefully by the time we get to March, or even hopefully in March, it gets warmer and starts to warm up, because spring theoretically is right around the corner. Although, I'll be honest, it feels like we are like just starting a harsh winter. But I'll keep you guys up to date on how that's going. So let's wrap this up here. Again, thank you for watching. I really, really appreciate it. This is the style of these videos until I get my laptop and I can start editing again. So thank you for watching. I appreciate it. We will talk next time. Bye for now, guys. See you.